Okay, so this is how to play Twitch like a challenger in Season 13. Twitch is one of those marksmen that is well known for his late game carry potential since he scales so hard with items. But what many people tend to forget is that Twitch is also super strong in lane. While Twitch loses to hit and run strategies, his damage is really hard to match when you allow him to get to maximum poison stacks for his E-spell. We are looking at the ADC main WastedOnTheDaily in this analysis, who has been challenger in solo queue since Season 11. As always, the link to their profile will be in the description. Twitch pretty much comes with everything a strong solo queue AD carry needs. Not only are your all-ins quite threatening, but Twitch also has excellent wave clear with his E when you use W to spread your venom. Fast pushing power is vital for lane priority since you can force the enemy to respond by crashing the minions into their tower. This punishes them for roaming, for example, while also enabling roams for yourself without sacrificing farm. CS and tower damage are a big deal, especially in solo queue, which means Twitch has a super easy time taking advantage of enemy supports to try to impact other parts of the map. Additionally, it is very difficult to actually punish Twitch for overextending like this, since you can simply enter stealth to escape with relative ease. A tool that is absolutely brutal in solo queue in its own right, by the way. Because, as a matter of fact, people have a hard time playing around stealth. Warded areas in particular will give the enemy a false sense of security, and in combination with Twitch's pushing potential, you can set up very nasty roams yourself as a result. This echo is Grandmaster, but mistakes happen everywhere. So these are your best strategies to use during the lane phase, but let's now see how Twitch is played in the mid game. And while we watch our challenger Twitch player pressure mid lane tower, you should keep in mind that if you want to have educational league content like this in your personal feed, all you need to do is click the subscribe button. But yes, mid lane is definitely the place to be, since you can quickly roam to anywhere on the map from here. In the mid-game especially, you need to take advantage of your stealth, so sneaking up on people to ambush them should be your #1 priority. Twitch's stealth is just excellent at punishing greed, and solo queue players are always greedy. However, the biggest upside of your stealth is the freedom it gives you in terms of teamfight positioning. Good players will always try to take the enemy AD carry out of the fight as early as possible, but if you use Twitch's Q correctly, the enemy simply won't find an opening. You can always stay in the back invisible, waiting for the opposing team to pull the trigger, and only join the fight once the engaged spells are on cooldown. Many Twitch players make the mistake of trying to sneak behind the enemy, when in reality it is always better to position just like any other AD carry. You stay protected by your front line, and the only difference is that you're invisible on top of that. This way, your impact is effectively guaranteed, no need to gamble. Now that fight was a crucial turning point, since Twitch's solo laners were terribly behind their opponents in gold and items. However, as a result of this clean performance, blue team can go for Baron here, and Twitch's Baron pressure is naturally high due to being an attack speed focused marksman. So your stealth is one key factor when it comes to teamfighting with Twitch. However, it is by no means unbeatable. You cannot stay camouflaged forever, and when the spell is on cooldown, the enemy technically has a window to punish you. But Twitch got another trick up his sleeve. When the enemy can see you, you naturally have to keep your distance so you don't get one-shot. But you threaten them with enormous damage nonetheless, since you can then take advantage of your ultimate's bonus attack range to still hit your targets while they cannot hit you back. Of course, this is the more difficult approach since you are more vulnerable, but knowing your exact range goes a long way here. However, you don't have to always look for teamfights with Twitch. Another unique quality he brings to the table is the ability to split push for his team. There are two conditions that a split pusher has to meet. You have to be safe and you have to be efficient. Twitch's safety is of course his stealth, and his efficiency comes from his attack speed items and wave clear. You take towers really fast if unchecked, which means you can have a winning impact on the game without fighting at all. But that will be kind of lame, wouldn't it? Especially when fed, you don't actually need to run. Instead, you just turn around and kill anyone trying to challenge you. You can probably imagine, but it always makes me super happy when I find a replay that is both suited for analysis and reaches the late game. Because then we get to experience the damage potential of an AD carry with a full item build. And in Twitch's case, the damage is particularly disgusting. However, if you want your damage to ever look like this, you first need to know what Twitch's optimal runes and items are to begin with. So without further ado, here are your best choices, all playtested in Challenger Elo. The perfect Twitch rune page that should be used every single game is Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Legend Alacrity and Coup de Grace, with Taste of Blood and Treasure Hunter secondary. As mentioned, Twitch is an attack speed focused champion, so Lethal Tempo is an easy choice. Twitch has one of the best bonus attack speed scalings in the entire game, yielding maximum benefits from this keystone. It plays perfectly with your Q resets, allowing you to absolutely dominate longer fights, while also hunting down escaping enemies with a combination of Q's move speed and Lethal Tempo's bonus range. Presence of Mind is another vital rune, as it ensures that you will never run out of mana for your Q resets, while also giving you more access to your crucial early game wave clear. Keep in mind that just one stack of your Venom on an enemy champion grants you increased mana regeneration for 10 full seconds, instead of the usual 4 seconds. The Venom damage refreshes Presence of Mind's duration over and over, making for a perfect combo. Now, Legend Alacrity is the most aggressive early game focused legend rune. Many ADC champions prefer Bloodline for more item flexibility, but on Twitch, Alacrity is especially important and too good to pass. Again, your bonus attack speed scalings are one of the best in the game, and snowballing the lane phase is a core aspect of your overall game plan, which means you naturally prefer early game runes either way. Due to that, Coup de Grace is also better than a late game rune like Cutdown would be. Sure, Cutdown might help against tanks in the late game, but it is simply overkill. Your core items on Twitch absolutely destroy tanks either way, whereas the pressure from Coup de Grace can make or break early skirmishes, which is much more impactful overall. For the same reason, you also want Taste of Blood. Not only is it another great combo with your Venom, allowing you to trigger the rune as soon as it comes off cooldown much more consistently, but it further adds to your early game power. Yes, you forego a late game rune like Eyeball Collection for example, but Twitch's late game with items is extremely strong either way. As a result, buffing his early laning instead is simply the more consistent choice. Treasure Hunter is finally picked as a way of getting these impactful items as fast as you can, since again your item scaling is absolutely brutal. So let's now have a look at what these items are exactly. Twitch's item build is actually super straightforward, which means even new players will have an easy time here. The core build is always the same in every single team composition, so feel free to just copy right away. Your core is Blade of the Ruined King, Berserker's Greaves, and Kraken Slayer in this exact order. And now it should also be clear why Twitch definitely doesn't need the Rune Cutdown to deal with tanks. Between Blade of the Ruined King's % health damage and Kraken Slayer's true damage, there won't be a single tank in the game who could ever ignore your attacks. But more importantly, these items are also some of the strongest in 1v1 situations, allowing you to take full advantage of your assassination potential with Q. Now, your late game items are not always as straightforward. In most games, your best options are Runaan's Hurricane, Infinity Edge, and Guardian Angel. But many Twitch players make the mistake of buying Infinity Edge before Hurricane, which is an absolute no-go. Getting Hurricane is mandatory for optimal teamfighting, since it greatly amplifies the value you get from your ultimate. Being able to auto-attack an entire team at once can be game-winning for Twitch, whereas killing isolated targets slightly faster is negligible by comparison. Once you have Hurricane, Infinity Edge is of course optimal in most games, but against hyper tanks you might need the added penetration from a Last Whisper item instead. Anyway, not every game will even reach the late game, but in contrast to that, every single game will have an early game. Playing the early game as clean as possible is especially important on Twitch, as you've seen, and for a full AD Carry lane phase guide you can click the link on your screen right there.